When Ukrainian drone pilots detect Russian multiple launch rocket systems, their greatest hope is that the enemy target is fully loaded with rockets, so they can be sure the Russian occupiers haven't yet fired on Ukrainian positions. That's exactly what happened with this particular rocket system, Grad-21, which had just moved into a combat position. The drone pilots delivered precise strikes. The explosion was massive. The Russians hide their military equipment in places where they hope Ukrainian drone pilots won't be able to find it. In this case, a drone pilot flew into a massive hangar and discovered 2 Russian armored personnel carriers inside. Without wasting any time, the pilot carried out a strike, after which those vehicles won't be going anywhere. Here, the Russians in a tank were rushing at full speed across an open field, attempting to break through and attack Ukrainian positions. A Ukrainian drone flew out to intercept them. That encounter turned out to be unexpectedly fatal for the Russian forces. Ukrainian intelligence spotted a Russian convoy moving to assault Ukrainian positions. Having raised kamikaze drones, Ukrainian operators began to attack Russian combat brigades. After encountering strong resistance, the Russians were forced to change their plans and retreat. But at that point, Ukrainian drone pilots weren't about to let them get away. Working together with artillery units, they delivered devastating strikes on the Russian armored vehicles. The surviving Russian soldiers abandoned their armored personnel carriers and ran into the forest, trying to hide from Ukraine's relentless drones. Here's another Russian tank that attempted to cross an open field, but the attempt ended in failure. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance did an excellent job. The tank exploded like a New Year's firework. This is a Ukrainian factory that the Russians destroyed and occupied. Now they think they're safe and behave as if they're at home. But that's far from the truth. Kamikaze drone pilots are there to remind them that they're not welcome, and the punishment awaiting them will be the harshest. After the strike, the enemy buggy catches fire, and not long after, all that's left of it is a charred metal frame. Here's another Russian tank that illegally crossed the Ukrainian border. The name Chornucha is clearly visible on its armor. A word that also implies something shady or unlawful. Ukrainian drone pilots quickly and mercilessly make it clear that there's no passage for Russians here. Here, a Russian armored convoy was confidently advancing for an assault, but unexpectedly, a Ukrainian tank rolled onto the battlefield and began striking the enemy column with precise, rapid fire. Panicked, Russian soldiers started jumping out of their armored vehicles and fleeing towards the tree line. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian tank continued to destroy the remaining Russian combat vehicles. Russian infantry on 2 armored vehicles were attacked by Ukrainian artillery. One armored personnel carrier did not even cross a forest landing and exploded on a mine, while the other was hit by an artillery shell. The Russian paratroopers try to hide among the trees, but it is the wrong time of year and there are almost no leaves on the trees. Ukrainian artillery starts shelling the forest. Ukrainian drones have also started destroying Russian armored personnel carriers. Armored vehicles began to burn. Another Russian armored personnel carrier was attacked by a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. Here's another Russian assault in the Donetsk region. The Russians deployed 1 tank and 3 armored personnel carriers. Ukrainian drone pilots had prepared for this moment and were already waiting for the Russian occupiers. Ukrainian defenders were eager to strike, ready to unleash their devastating and furious blow on the invaders. First, Ukrainian artillery began targeting the Russian column. With precise artillery strikes, 1 Russian armored personnel carrier was destroyed, followed by another, both of which were transporting Russian assault troops. Then, kamikaze drone pilots arrived and began attacking the enemy mechanized column. After halting the movement of the Russian vehicles, a Ukrainian tank rolled onto the battlefield and started delivering direct hits. The kamikaze drone pilots also continued to destroy the damaged Russian equipment, ensuring total devastation. Here's a nighttime Ukrainian bomber drone, also known as Baba Yaga. It drops heavy munitions on Russian tanks, destroying both the armor and the entire tank. After wiping out all the vehicles, the drone pilots began searching for surviving Russian occupiers who had fled into the forest, attempting to hide. Here, a Ukrainian M2 Bradley encountered a Russian armored personnel carrier. A fierce firefight broke out between them, resulting in the Russian armored personnel carrier being shot to pieces. As a result, it caught fire from the inside and started to emit thick smoke. The surviving crew members jumped out of the armored vehicle while it was still moving. And here are other Russian armored personnel carriers that were abandoned and then finished off by Ukrainian drone pilots and the crew of the M2 Bradley combat vehicle. One of the Russian armored personnel carriers, which had been camouflaged near a building, tried to escape the battlefield. However, aerial reconnaissance saw everything. After that, Ukrainian drone pilots and artillery units began targeting it, delivering precise strikes. Luhansk region, fighting near the village of Zolotarifka, the Russians attempted to break through Ukrainian positions using a large number of armored vehicles and attacking Ukrainians from several flanks simultaneously. The Russians' goal was to disperse Ukrainian forces, attack by surprise, and gain a foothold in new positions, but Ukrainian artillerymen and drone pilots were ready for this. As soon as Russian columns of armored vehicles began to appear on the horizon, Ukrainian artillery opened fire and began to attack the enemy. Drone pilots also launched strikes. After several hits, the Russian armored personnel carrier, Turtle, stops, and about 10 Russian infantrymen disembark. They quickly run into the forest area to hide from the drones. But the kamikaze drone pilots continue to attack the enemies. Russian assault group on buggies tried to break through deep into Ukrainian positions, but were met by a kamikaze drone pilot. They were never able to break through. From the other flank, Russian assault troops advanced in 4 armored vehicles, but they also came under heavy Ukrainian fire and were destroyed. After abandoning their damaged armored personnel carrier, the Russians switched to a buggy and were about to flee the battlefield. But at that moment, a kamikaze drone pilot delivered a precise strike on them. Russians were forced to flee. The major Russian breakthrough was successfully repelled by Ukrainian warriors. And this is the Donetsk region. Magyar Birds pilots attack Russian trucks transporting ammunition and weapons to the front line. What a massive explosion from the truck! It detonated perfectly. And here is another Russian vehicle that the Russian forces are using to assault Ukrainian positions. This one doesn't detonate anymore, but it catches fire. Russian soldiers are running around in panic, unable to do anything, but they should have thought about it when they signed a contract with the Russian army and went to fight on Ukrainian territory. They voluntarily received their one-way ticket. This is also Donetsk region. Ukrainian drone Baba Yaga is laying mines along the road, scattering them around the perimeter. Just a few hours later, a Russian MTLB successfully detonates on one of them. After that, the drone pilot delivers the final strike. Here, Russian infantry quickly hide in their burrows. Not waiting for long, Ukrainian kamikaze drone pilots deliver precise strikes on their trenches' burrows. Other Russians tried to hide among the buildings, but even there, they couldn't escape the Ukrainian drone pilots. The Russians decided to flee the battlefield at night, but night is not an obstacle for drones equipped with a thermal imaging camera. The outskirts of the village of Kurylivka, Kursk region. The Russians tried to push Ukrainian soldiers out of the village, but they met fierce resistance. Kamikaze drone pilots ruthlessly destroyed any equipment the Russians used for their breakthrough. Here are Russian assault troops on a pickup truck. After the first hit, the Russians decided to just run away. And this is a Russian bukanka, modified for transporting infantry. Overall, a lot of Russian vehicles were destroyed that day. All Russian attempts to break through to Ukrainian positions were intercepted by kamikaze drone pilots. After that, Russian vehicles turned into molten metal. Russian assault troops often use buggies and quad bikes for offensive operations. They are highly maneuverable and fast, but their main disadvantage is the lack of armor. Therefore, destroying such a target is very easy for kamikaze drone pilots. A Russian MTLB with an open hatch, a very good place to hit it and destroy it. One precise hit to the hatch and the armored personnel carrier burns to ashes. And here is an abandoned infantry fighting vehicle. It also needs to be destroyed. Donetsk region, the action takes place near the village of Zelene Pole. Two Ukrainian assault troops, while carrying out a combat mission, discovered a Russian dugout burrow and captured a Russian soldier. That's all for today, friends. Subscribe to the channel to be the first to know the latest news. This video was produced by Hustler. See you soon.